Hey everyone, Stu Leeds here from Revyz again for another Cloud Talk. Super excited. This week we have Darin LaFramboise, who is from OpusGuard, and we're going to talk about his very long experience in the tech industry. We're going to talk about him working at Meta. We're going to talk about the Atlassian world from both the inside and now from the outside. So welcome to the stage, Darin. We're going to bring you right up to the front. How are you going?
Good. It's a wonderful summer day here, just sitting here in a little bit of air conditioning. Really excited to chat a little bit about the industry, where it's going, what it's been like, and some of the excitement around Atlassian and team and some trends there.
Nice. And where is here? Where are you based right now?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, we're global right now, aren't we? You're halfway around the sphere. I'm in Lafayette, California, so just about 30 minutes east of San Francisco, which is interesting that you have a lush green countryside only 30 minutes from the city, but it's beautiful out here.
I was really lucky to visit San Fran before team this year to meet my boss for the first time after working with him for a year like this digitally. And, he took me on a hike, 20 minutes, half an hour outside of San Fran. We went out into the hills. We drove past Meta and Google and all of these places and went out into the hill. And I was like, oh, this is very much like home, which is New Zealand for me. You've got the best of both worlds.
Yeah, it's wild. We probably got a great view of. Were you on the western side of the ocean, or were you on the eastern side looking down at the donut that's Apple?
We were on the. Where were we? We were close to one of the universities, and they own a whole lot of green, lush land. Wherever that is, Stanford. There you go. Yeah. We were down there. So, and I got lost as well. We went for a kind of a hike for an hour and a half, and then I said, "Oh, do you mind if I run the last few miles? Because I'm just an avid trail runner." He said, "Yeah, sure. I'll meet you at the car." I didn't meet him at the car. Right? Like an hour later, he drove to another part, and we found each other. But yeah.
Oh wow. Yeah, it's beautiful.
I got lost in Kelly. It was great.
Great.
Hey, and I've been doing some stalking of your profile, and you have a really fascinating career. Some of the kind of some big brands like Meta, Facebook, Atlassian as well on the internal side. But what I'd love to do is sort of go back a little bit further. Tell me, how did you get into the tech industry? What did that look like?
Yeah, it's such a wild time. I went to UC Davis, which University of California, Davis. It's a local, it's a pretty good one. I think we're number 4 now in the nation. But I studied econ, so I always grew up in tech. Like I loved building servers and websites back at the birth, the '93 of the web, and it was always a hobby to me. And then I was like, I'll get a real job, study econ, go into finance, and graduated. And the entire world collapsed. And so in 2008, no jobs in finance. And a company called me up in San Diego, and they're just like, hey, it seems like you can do some modeling and some data stuff. It was proflowers.com, which now they're not really well known, but it was the leading, in my opinion, e-commerce delivery, direct-to-consumer flower shops. And it was even a relic a bit from the original .com boom. But what they were doing at the time in the 2008 crash was getting people from like hedge funds and banks and finance, people who had worked with large data sets, with the hypothesis that if we give them a SQL credential and like full reign of everything, they're going to build a cool business. So it was like the beginning of analytics.
Wow.
And I kind of fell into it. I didn't think it was real. They flew me down to San Diego, and like I got a convertible rental car, and it's like, okay, this is weird. And then like I was in a suit because I was goofy. I was like, you're supposed to interview in suits. And they're looking at me in shorts and flip-flops like, you worked in finance, didn't you? I'm like, yeah. Okay. Well, no more of this. But it was great. A lot of smart people. I honestly learned from so many capable people who have since then kind of discipled into tech. But we were doing things at that time that just weren't capable, like on a large scale, like site split testing, building analytical models, doing a lot of price testing, image testing, all these things with data that we take for granted today. It was like 2008 to 2011. So that's really how I got my start, was a company selling flowers direct to consumer, taking a bet on me who had just graduated with a little bit of of a finance background. It was just so much fun.
And so you earned your tech stripes. How did you go from there to the biggest social media platform that ever existed?
Yeah. Hopefully ever does exist if I'm as a shareholder here. But it was an interesting journey. So around 2008, 2011, economy not great, and even in tech, it was still a very hold the purse strings tight. And I don't know if you know this, but San Diego is about 550 miles from Silicon Valley, and therefore is not actually the center of tech. So unfortunately, what happened for me, like I love San Diego, but the job was paid in sunshine, and I needed to ride the wave and build a career. And sure enough, as companies got more and more invested in Silicon Valley, as VCs started pouring money into became what was the last boom, opportunities started rising up. And I still remember famously, kind of like a mentor, the boss's boss's boss, and was like, all right, I think I need to go to San Francisco and get one of these big jobs. I just don't think I can grow here. And he's like, okay, here's what's going to happen. I'm going to offer you a good package for a San Diego job. You're not going to take it because the experience you'll get by going up there and being in the community with the Googles and Facebooks, and he was former Apple, you're just going to get so much more in experience and money than anything down here can provide. And then when you do well there, come on back and we'll work on something else, or you'll be fine in San Diego. But it was one of those thoughts of like, if this is going to be my career, I need to be where it is. And until recently, where remote became possible, like the way it is, we all knew that you had to be around the epicenter. So I joined a startup called One Kings Lane. At the time, it was a bit of an interesting flash sales model, overstock model, like, really perfect for the time after the fall of the economy, which is now there's all these goods everywhere and they need to go somewhere. So an entire business around it, got to ride it from a couple of the fundraising rounds. And it was going great. It was just a really interesting way to see how product management works, how product strategy works, how like really experienced tech teams do. Like we had good experience at San Diego, but now I'm like with people who had been at these other companies. And again, just that eagerness to continue to learn. And it was around like 2013, we started to see the end of that flash sales model. Now the economy is getting good. E-commerce is doing well. Our business model isn't sustainable. And at that point, Facebook became like the old Kirby of video games, of like, okay, who can do analytics? Who can do product management? Like they were growing rapidly. And I applied just thinking there's no way they're going to hire me. And I got in like as an analyst to help build search. It was at a time when we thought we could beat Google search in 2013. But continuously grateful of my time there. It's just like every role that I've described so far, I learned so much. I get to meet so many key people and grow in ways I never did and be part of something large. And Facebook, what was so wild about that is just like the impact, the global impact that we had there at that time. And mind you, in 2013, we didn't have much of a mobile app either. We were still desktop based. Right. So one last tidbit on that. Yeah, I'll pause there.
I'll ask you a question on that. You're in Facebook, and just the enormity of the data set, right? It must, like, to me, it's the amount of data that Facebook have stored is abstract. I can't imagine it. It's like understanding how many stars are in the universe. To me, it's like
it was exactly that.
It's big. So how do you go from like, well, we've got these database servers and they have transactions in them, and we've got customers, and we can kind of connect lines between this and that to make, to hypothesize a theory or an idea, and then take us down an avenue to prove it and extract value. How's the approach when you've got this just gargantuan
right? Yeah, the evolution of data services and even the role of who an analyst is evolved. Like, so in 2008 at Pro Flowers, we were running on Microsoft SQL Server, which was like a very beginning stage of what SQL is. It had size limits, it had database crashes, it had problems, and we had to often like export it and do some Python to do larger data sets, but it was really limited. Like we had to be very careful.
Select A from B where equals something.
Yeah, right? But never do a select star, right? And always do a no lock so you don't lock out your other buddies who are querying. Like it was really powerful but rudimentary, but more powerful than the previous generation who was on Excel. in that time from 08 to 13, the thing that came in that saved us was Hadoop. So we're no longer thinking of our databases as structured data in storage. We were structuring it in process. So Hadoop is a way to collect a bunch of flat files in a very lightly formed way and actually turn it into large data sets. It was the birth of big data. But when I got to Facebook, it was wild because I was like, okay, we've got about 1 billion monthly active users, 10 billion users if you count the 9 billion that were fake accounts. But then you have every interaction, right? Like the average person at that time was spending about 30 minutes a day on Facebook. Eventually that grew to an hour. Every click, every impression, everything is stored. And we're using Hadoop, which is incredibly powerful that you could technically select star across all these events. But we haven't yet invented Presto. So your queries take hours, days, and so you got to get that syntax right. The hack we did, just to cut to the chase, is sampling. Like you had to sample the data. So if there's 1 billion people, 1/1000th of them is a representative set, or 1/10,000th is a representative set. Making sure that you have true anonymized randomization too. So you're not just doing like, okay, anyone whose ID ends in 0, anyone whose ID ends in 1. So using things like a modulus and things like that to like truly randomize who you're grabbing from. So it really leaned on, undergrad statistical analysis from UC Davis to think about how do we get an answer from it. And that again was because the technology hadn't caught up yet in 2013 to how do you manage big data sets. I'll sound like a curmudgeon, like an old man right now. Kids these days have it so easy. Thanks to Presto and Snowflake and Looker and all these services, you can query that with a select star because all the optimizers in the way that it works now. But at that time, you're building Python scripts to actually execute these Hadoop queries to map and reduce and find out where the data is and then figure it out. Really hard. I'll say something interesting that was shocking when I got to Facebook, which is even in 2013, they'd been around since 2004, technically as a company, but realistically, maybe 2007 when they expanded the network. I assume they had all this data logged. And it was interesting. They didn't really start thinking of analytics until about 2009. So some of the data sets only go so far back other than like core things like identity and entities. But a lot of the usage stuff just wasn't logged yet. So a lot of the data didn't get actively logged until around 2012, 2013, when they started hiring the wave of analysts. So moving from an engineering-led company and a product company to also having the data piece. So there's a lot where it's like, okay, let me look at history for search for the last 4 years. And it's like, well, we didn't start logging it till last year. But, it was just like an interesting realization of they're moving so fast. Headcount was an interesting thing. Just to put it in context, 2013, Facebook had just crossed 1 billion monthly actives, not a strong mobile presence yet, and 5,000 employees, I believe, was the headcount at that point in time. And I think in terms of revenue, I want to say sub $10 billion a year, maybe even less. Like I thought of it when I joined as a big company, like, oh my God, it's Facebook. But actually, in hindsight, it was small,
Totally. And so you traveled in your career through, Facebook, landed in the Atlassian world.
Yeah.
Tell me what's different. What was different about and so your first Atlassian, or your first role, if we call it in the broader Atlassian community, was that at Atlassian, or did you go in through another? What was your entry point?
Facebook. So Facebook, I did search, and then went into the ads product and a bit of like the how businesses work within Facebook. And then I went to Atlassian as a head of analytics for the ecosystem team, the marketplace and the ecosystem platform. At that point, the ecosystem, I think we were doing 100 million in gross volume, as in sales through the marketplace. And the strategy there was like, great, we have all this data flowing in from the plugins and the Connect API. How do we build it? And so by the time I left, all the different things that we tweaked around with thoughts and strategies, grew up to whatever it is now, like over $1.25 billion in gross volume per year. We'll talk about that in a bit, but that's how I transitioned. What it was like, though, like, to put it frank, I got to sleep and I gained confidence in my own job. Facebook was amazing, but in that hyper growth phase, there's a lot of pressure, a lot of need to continue to deliver, a lot of needs to like grow the business. I mean, and we did, right? Like Facebook now is a $1.8 trillion company because a lot of people I worked with were doing, but the demand was high. Like you were working all the time around the clock. You're traveling a lot to figure out what are the people in Indonesia doing? What are the people in in Europe doing to build small businesses on it? Like, how does it differentiate? It was a lot. Also, the commute was rough. Silicon Valley, it's only a 20-minute from my apartment there, but it was like 3 hours at times to get between the two. Atlassian, yeah, and the culture of Atlassian was just so much more methodical and relaxed. And I think it's really because it's an Australian company, in that, we're going to work hard between the hours of the job, but then we also have personal lives. We have families, we've got interests, we've got communities to work with. And we're going to, the more we can relax outside of work, we can come in with our best selves. And that was just such a cultural change. And then there's also the product itself. For me, the big thing is this is a shift from B2C and consumer product into B2B and SaaS product eventually. And the way you execute is very different. It is more methodical. It's a little more long drawn out. You have a little bit more of an opportunity to take things as they come and think through them a bit more. In the consumer world, I mean, we were competing against Twitter. Then we were competing against Snapchat. Now they're competing against TikTok. Like, consumers, they can pivot on a dime, whereas at least with B2B SaaS, migrating those Confluence pages is a little bit of work.
So tell me, how did it feel for you as a person? Like, it sounds like it was life-changing, right? To go into this much more methodical, but also kind of chill, relaxed style of workplace. And I mean, I've only been involved in the Atlassian world for under 2 years. What I've noticed is, I've worked in tech around the world a lot. So there's always a grain of salt that comes with this type of statement. But Atlassian is the first ecosystem, not just company, but ecosystem, where I feel like people are actually living the philosophies, right? And different teams, different managers, different leaders, different companies, different, there's different degrees in which people are living it. But you have people talking about like this remote work being successful. And I've heard it time and time again in different organizations that I've touched and consulted with and worked in. And it's like, sure, but you're really just converting old ways of doing things into Zoom, and you've got cameras watching people to make sure they don't leave their desk because you're afraid of change. And so, but I meet people from all over the world, solution partners and marketplace partners and Atlassians, and it's just like, here's an example. I remember going to my first Atlassian conference, which was High Velocity Sydney, November last year, or late last year. And I met a bunch of people from Atlassian, as you do. And they were saying, what's your experience so far? And I said, this is wild, because I'm meeting so many of you people that I've just seen on Zoom screens, or I've just seen on the community or on LinkedIn or whatever. And I said, it's great to meet you guys in real life. And he said, like, it's no different for us. Like, I live in Sydney, but I haven't met my boss for 4 months, in real life. And this is wonderful for us. So, that's my experience, and then I guess we take it to team, and it's like 10 times, 100 times more in terms of like the human kind of centralization. So how did it change your, long lead up to the question. Right?
Yeah.
What did that lead to you in terms of as an individual? And, we talk about your productivity, but just your general well-being and happiness.
So much. Okay. So gosh, I don't even know. Let's start with one that's obvious. So when you allow someone that time to sleep and have that cutoff, my manager, Nick, he would look over and be like, it's 5 o'clock. Why are you still here? I'm like, I don't know, because you are, and I still got some more stuff to do. He's like, yeah, but it'll be here tomorrow. I'm like, okay. Like, very much that encouragement of, hey, you haven't taken some time off. You're like, when we still had PTO, it's like your number's getting a little bit high. Like, take a couple days. That style of culture, that encouragement, just even there, because we weren't really remote yet, which I want to clarify, we should call it distributed, not remote, because it's It's an interesting differentiation. We can get into that. But that allowed me to sleep and think about things and capture thoughts. And what like really changed about my entire career at that moment, the ecosystem, that became my passion and is still my passion. I developed this passion for multi-sided platforms and all the intricacies that go into it that became the Atlassian Marketplace and then other things I've worked on. That is how it helped me personally, is like, I'm not worried about making sure everything's done. I'm like, I have enough time to pause and think. In terms of the distributed work style, I agree. Like at first at Atlassian, Marketplace was in San Francisco and our platform was in Sydney. So there was a little bit of working with the folks over there, and that created this idea of, or an emphasis of making sure that I'm eloquent and clear in what my content is or what I'm trying to deliver, so I can respect the amount of time we all have. Because that's the real goal of distributed, is we only meet when we need to, and we're going to be to the point. I would even say at Facebook, that was really good because we were distributed there, being global, which was, they were really good about, like, you had to do your pre-reads. You had to come into the meeting with context so we could keep the meeting 15 minutes or 30 minutes. We don't want to spend most of that meeting just preambling. It's not a good use of anyone's time. And there was a culture of it there. And even at Atlassian and most distributed companies, same thing. Like, cool, you read the product requirement doc. Great. I see the comments that are here. And even the way we iterate within Confluence with the comment and resolution, usually we can resolve it if it's obvious. And it's only needed to meet when there's still a little bit of an unclear point there. I would say that is the big cultural change, is the ability to think about things more because that pace and that emphasis of personal well-being. There's also the understanding of how to work in a distributed environment. You know, there's like, depending on time of year, you got 2 hours overlap with Sydney or 0. And so really maximizing that late day me, early them. When Marketplace moved to India, it became even harder, right? Like, take a map, take the longest string you got, or try to figure out the 3 hardest points to negotiate. And it's like Bangalore, San Francisco, and Sydney. And it's like each one is like 8 hours apart almost, and not in the same way, right? Like, but
you just described Revyz. Right?
Yeah,
Pune, San Fran, Auckland. Right.
At least Opus Guard, it's here and it's Toronto right now. You know, my partner is Shu. It's great, but you know, that really just changes how what we own as individuals and what we need to do and how we work. Like, collaboration means, you know, do your best work on itself, think through it quite a bit, respect the other person's time and the fact that it's not going to necessarily line up, but do it in a way that they can self-digest it where they need to be. So that way, when you do meet, you can be as efficient as possible. Companies I work on site, it's so inefficient. It's just like, I go to a meeting, we spend all that time in the meeting talking about the meeting, planning another meeting. There's too much like leeway on like, I'll just drive by, I'll just have that conversation after the meeting. And I was like, do you not understand the bias and the challenges to people who aren't physically there when you do that? You're actually ruining someone's career by having that meeting between the meeting, because now they don't have the context to do the thing they could have done that could have grown. Like, there's so much about that just like kills me. And so I would say all these thoughts came
back
from
channeling.
Yeah, back channeling is the worst. Like, work in the open. That was like the key culture of Atlassian. Like, why is this doc locked? Open it up, right? Unless it's like shareholder interest, like let's not lock it down.
So let's ask it. Let me ask another angle from this kind of freeing up of work style, your location, dropping the need to commute so badly, and perhaps just that different mentality. How did it impact on you in terms of creativity and ideation?
Yeah. I feel like you're leading the witness on this one a little bit, but like, I'm a very passionate product builder. I'm not so much a process-based product person. It's like, okay, I'll write the doc and do this. I like to think through things, and just like a strategy game or anything else, like I'll get really focused, write down, and then I'll just kind of hit a natural stopping point where it's like, now I'm just kind of overly dwelling on something. And so like, I genuinely need to step away for a while. And if we were to think of it as billing hours, it would be a non-billable step away, right? Like, now I can like go to my garden and plant something or pick some weeds, or like I can use the work hours that I need to use necessarily to kind of free up my abilities. So that way I can walk away, come back truly with fresh eyes. Whereas in that traditional 9 to 5 or 8 to 5 scenario at an office, I end up losing productivity because I have to be there, and I won't be able to like unblock myself till the next day when I've gone home and come back and I'm like, oh, right. So like that has been awesome, where my day isn't a rigid 8-hour block or 4-hour block, 4-hour block. It's cool. I can step away here for this moment. And, companies tried to do this before the tech of distributed work allowed us, which is like at Facebook, we had an arcade. So I'd go play pinball for like an hour. I'm like an avid pinball player, by the way. I love it. I wouldn't play for an hour, so that's a misstatement. But I'd go play for a few minutes, takes my mind off it, go back to my desk, and then I'd be unblocked on whatever I was working on. Those are the things that we used to be able to do that we gained a lot in the working where we are, meeting people where they are, working where people are. There are things that are harder that are worth calling out, but pros and cons, I like the distributed style much better. Plus, we don't have an office space lease that we're locked into with Opus Guard, so there's also a nice advantage there of I can give, we can agree $500 stipend to spend on personal equipment because that's nothing compared to even a WeWork subscription.
100%, and we're the same. So I'd love to understand, you're an entrepreneur now, right? You have your own business. You're on the Atlassian Marketplace. Tell me, I love to call this the napkin moment, right? Where the idea was scribbled on the napkin in the proverbial. Tell me what led to okay, we're doing this.
Yeah, it's a crazy time in tech. Let's start with that. Like, there's an obvious. I had a job, and the strategic priorities of that company are going in a different way, and I no longer had said job. It was, you know what? We got to work over here. So, thank you. It's time to move on. And so there's like multiple routes. Like I could go get another job, but they set me up with a career coach when I left, and she did the little like, okay, tell me a bit about yourself. And she's like, you sound very entrepreneurial. Like, why don't you go build something? I was like, why don't I? Like, what are the things that usually block someone from building something? It could be, it's usually all sorts of opportunity costs. I can make more money working for someone. That assumes I need to earn more money. I might need, in the US, I need health insurance, unfortunately. So like, if I'm an entrepreneur, getting health insurance is not easy. Do I think I can actually execute? That own self-doubt. Do I think I have the right people in my network? Do I know the product well enough? Do I know how to bring it to market? Anyway, I just thought about all those things. And then what happened was I was like, I don't know. And I think that's actually the cheat code is like, if I had high confidence in all of this, I'd probably still have a regular job. I don't know. I think there's a degree of accepting that I'm strong on some things and not strong in others. The napkin moment for this actual product is much more boring than that, which is like, and I want to be honest, like compliance and security frameworks and privacy, incredibly important, not just from a legal perspective, but for people too. So I don't want to like really discount it by saying boring, but it's not something that I thought I would ever jump out of bed and say, I'm going to go solve content retention manager problems for IT admins who use Confluence. Like it was different than I'm going to connect the world, right, at Facebook.
Yeah.
But I just got friends that are working as IT admins and legal ops, and my wife works in a legal team, and she's just like, at the end of the day, she's complaining about like the tooling and all this stuff. And I'm looking at it, I'm like, why has someone not figured this out? And then like, for some places it has been figured out. And then like, there's all these different approaches. And then I'm like thinking, okay, Atlassian has 300,000 teams. You got a marketplace of $1.25 billion of transactional revenue on the App Store. It's growing. Atlassian's moving up market. When we think of compliance and regulation and all this, that's the blockers to moving up market that we're helping Atlassian with. And so that was the initial like dots are connecting of like, okay, if I can take this haphazard tool that she has, because she works for a large company, so good on them, and then find a way to deliver it to everyone everywhere who doesn't have that capability. And I was like, dude, you were at like Atlassian, Forge, right? Like Marketplace. It's built so if you have this idea, you can at least bring it there and test it out. So that was like the aha moment. The napkin moment was really just this like most basic thing of like content, and anything that anyone puts in there is a liability. I learned this back at Facebook. So I worked on a project for Facebook in China, which was wild. Like that is a whole conversation we can have in its own one day. But I'm out in China and we're working on the business side for a little bit. It's just like a little small project. And then I'm talking to the local team who is not Facebook, but something else. And I'm like, why can't we be here? And they're like, the government doesn't like that it's free form entry on everything in Facebook. Like they would allow it if everything could be controlled. And so at that time I was like, well, that's silly. And now I'm like thinking about from a GDPR perspective, and it's not too different. It's not, around freedom of speech. It's more about that protection of what if I want to make sure I can delete something, or make sure that thing I said that one time doesn't become a long-term liability. That's kind of like always been in my head, where I like was skeptical of it. And then as I start seeing how companies are deploying things like, we're going to delete all your emails that go beyond a year. And now they start cleaning up old systems, or even in the transition of data center to Confluence and Atlassian, some companies are even saying like, we're just going to wipe it and start over because who knows what's on that thing, right? That was a lot of the culmination of events. And then, yeah, like not having a job and not thinking, I don't know if I'm ready to go for another job yet. I kind of want to like take a break and think about something. And I was like, I want to try my hand at building something.
Nice.
It also isn't my first time building something. It's just like my first time building a software or something.
Yeah. I love it. And I saw our CEO showed me a slide from a company was doing their annual report, and he showed me a slide that they had presented, which showed kind of on one side the company's product, which was in security and backup and data resiliency, right? On the other side, there was these two converging kind of compliance with DORA and this too, and all of these things. On the other side is like the tooling, but also, as you said, going up market, the criticality, the use, the breadth of use within organizations of these cloud tools in particular, like Atlassian, is becoming this really powerful convergence. And the context of that conversation for us was like, we're in good business, right? It's like, because we feel, and I really would love your thoughts on this, that evidenced by a lot of enterprise businesses who come to us and say, hey, can we shorten the backup retention window down to 6 months? Because we kind of don't want to keep it longer than that because of all of the potential risk that data has from a litigious perspective of, people can go if it exists, they can go and look at it, and then that exposes a risk to us as company directors. So, and then I had another solution partner who I'm two solution partners that I met like last week, both of them in Europe, going, we're going to talk about this DORA stuff. We've got to talk about this. People don't realize how much this is going to impact them. We already have GDPR. So with all of that in mind, what's your take on this? Is this just the beginning?
Oh my gosh, yeah. And it's killing me as a founder, right? Because like the founder conundrum, which is I want revenue so I can pay myself. But the reality is like, we got lucky that like this little looming idea, the opportunity cost going away. My co-founder is so highly skilled. Here, oh, by the way, on the remote work part, distributed work, he and I worked together at Auth0 for like 2.5 years remotely, never physically meeting each other in person. The first time we met in person was Atlassian team, and like, and we were like. We're like best buds on this whole thing, but we had never, it was an emotional moment where I'm like, shoo, I've never met you before. Like, it was like this amazing thing. So there's that. So in building it, sometimes we get lucky, and the thing that we're thinking about in our head is a little bit ahead of the curve. Like when I was doing the retention management, mostly what I was thinking about actually was my wife's like experience in legal, which is like, when you get served a lawsuit or a subpoena, you have to retain those records, collect them, and then produce them to the opposing counsel. And I was like, well, there's not really a way to do that in Atlassian very easily. So I'm going to build a tool that's around identifying all the content and then exporting it in a way and all that. And so, a little bit of some tooling that already exists both in the marketplace, but making it really focused on the legal ops team. And then it kind of expanded, which is this other realization of like, looking at locally, like HIPAA and FINRA and then GDPR and all these things. And they all kind of come down to this thing of like, do you actually know what's on your system? Like, you have 2,000 employees on your Confluence, maybe. Like, do you know who said what? Is that disparaging of another company that in discovery could actually be used against you in a court of law? Maybe you do, maybe you don't. Plausible deniability and all that, but your best practice is keep what you need, get rid of what you don't, and just move on, right? Like, have a continued process of like making sure you're retaining what you need to, and then remove. And like you said on the legal action, it's interesting. Like, sounds awful to say it, but it's not evidence unless it's in a case or there's a subpoena. So to a degree, it's a matter of making sure things don't become evident or become a discoverable item, right? Like, it's not illegal to shred stuff off your desk. But once it is in investigation and is being under investigation, or there's a plausible investigation, or even if you like, it does get into a gray zone then that you do have to secure things. And that's kind of that balance too that happens with this. But to your point, I think we're ahead of the curve of this, unfortunately. The solutions partners are seeing it. You can see Atlassian launching Guard. I love the name because it's very close to ours. You can see, the new ISO 27001, the 2022 revision, which I don't know if you knew this, the enforcement only started April 30th of this year. So everyone who's thinking about ISO, they're thinking about what they needed to comply with from a 2013 standard. That's pre-Cloud SaaS. That's early GDPR, but before things got the way they are now. And so what's happening now, I think, is in the next year or so, remember those ISO certs are only good for about 3 years. So the auditors are going to be doing gap analysis. They're going to be looking at all these new requirements. One is how you regulate your backups. Good for you guys. One is how you do information deletion. So retention, deletion, classification. That's good for us. And then spotting, great. By the way, the stat is 371 SaaS apps is what the average enterprise uses today. They're going to say, of all these SaaS products that every employee is creating that content on, how are you managing the backup? How are you managing the deletion? How are you managing retentions? How are you communicating the policies? And I just want to be there, probably like you guys. Like, I'm the easy button, just at least on Atlassian for a couple bucks a month. I'm here for you, right? And that's kind of thought. But yeah, I think we're ahead of the curve here. I think people are going to start getting it in the next year, especially after right now we're in European summer break, right? So probably won't hear much more until October, but I think when October comes around, that new year, and then the investment that comes after it, we could be looking at an end of year boom. And I do think it's going to emanate out from the usual suspects. So Germany, Austria, and then go out from there. That's kind of the thing that works against us as a North American company. When we started doing this, a lot of the business here is the attitude is more around, I'll wait till it's a problem. I'll wait till there's a breach or a lawsuit or someone challenges it. But in the EU, the way the laws are written, it's very proactive, right? It's fine. If you're not going to do it, 5% of your gross revenue, right? We'll go after you ahead of time. So that's something that I'm noticing.
Yeah. I guess to reinforce what you're saying, we do a lot of webinar work from our European cohort solution partners. The demand for doing webinars on this specific topic of compliance and NIS2 and DORA, I think I've got 3 to happen, like bang, bang, bang. I had Jan from Udocus push me into doing one at the end of this month because it's kind of before everyone in Germany goes away on their big break. But I've got Belgium, I've got Finland, I've got Germany all lined up because this is such a huge talking point in Europe. And I think like the other half of my life is talking to people in the States, and it's definitely there, but just like you said, just without perhaps the urgency.
Yeah.
So look, I think you've rolled the dice really well. Your napkin is a wonderful one, right? And you know, we're because we genuinely, like you, we genuinely care about this stuff. We want, you know, we've kind of fallen for this whole Atlassian community thing, and we want people to thrive. We want it to grow. We feel like we're now part of this. We feel like we're a child within the ecosystem. We really do. So,
Yeah.
you know, we're going to be your biggest cheerleader to help kind of protect the businesses who come on board with ITSM, with JSM, and want to continue to thrive. We want to help move those data center people into cloud and away from it, and it's going to require a lot more of us. It's like, I'm going to be really honest, there's still some gaps to fill. So I think the marketplaces, you know, the marketplace for the enterprise focus, if anyone's watching this, you know, and you want to start playing with Forge and solving some problems, man, I'm like, go do it and go and talk to Atlassian Ventures about it, because you know, I think there's a really big market. I think there's plenty of problems to solve and a really thriving ecosystem in which to do business with.
I mean, you're calling out something. We talked about the culture a bit, and like that was the thing within Atlassian we always want to present within the ecosystem is when you read the marketplace partner terms and everything, we want I don't know, it's hard to say where I exist anymore. It's intended by design that everyone within the marketplace plays nice and has that same spirit, and like the team event is like none other. My partner, he was just like, he came from Amazon, so he's just like expecting a little bit more of like a sales approach style event. Like, no, everyone's gonna be fun. You're gonna meet everyone, and everyone's gonna love you, and you're gonna love everyone. It's unlike anything, that ecosystem. That's by design. We don't support a lot of like talking ill on each other. The guidelines are very clear on the marketplace. You have to present your best use case, present what you do well. Don't worry about what the other person's doing. They'll present their use case. And a lot of the strategy is about that. The way we elevate people in the metal tiers from silver to gold to platinum is also around how you're working with Atlassian, not just making money on Atlassian. Like, that's the intent. I'm glad that's still going there. On Forge, like, it's very hot topic in the community. I was on the side of like working with the team that built the beta, and then it happened to GA later. Our app is entirely Forge based because it just saved us so much time and cost to go there. Plus the nature of retention management and the automated deleting. We also, and like, this is like the opposite of your world. Like, we wanted zero data egress. We did just not want to take on the challenges and the requirements of how I hold and become a processor of someone else's stuff. So like, as a product data person, it killed me because we don't have any analytics in the app either. Like, I have no idea how anyone's using this thing, because I'm like, if I want to really put my like best foot forward and be what I'm saying, which is I don't need that to build your product.
Wow.
So that's, you know, that's our goal anyway, is like Forge really afforded that with us. And, you know, the team has been great too. Like, we got to spend a good bit of time with Tim Pedersen at team to like kind of, okay, here's everything that's great. Here's everything that, you know, can you work on? You know, there's stuff to go, but for our use case, it's really powerful. And we're hoping that that gives us an edge on the enterprise side as well, because that at least assures the customer that it's operating on the Atlassian stack. And I think that's the intent of where Forge is going.
Yeah, I'd agree. And, you know, as you said, it is a super hot topic.
Yeah.
Darin, my friend, I feel like we could talk all day. And I think we're going to have to do this again, but I'm going to have to call it after doubling the amount of time that we said we would spend.
I'm so sorry about that. But let's do it again.
It's been great, mate. It's been great. Yeah, we'll do it again. So with that, we're going to end the recording, and, you know, thank you for everyone who's watched this far. If you want to reach out to Darin, his details will be wherever we post this video. His details will be in the comments below and in the description. Go and check out their marketplace page. Go and check out his website. Reach out to him. He's a friendly guy. I met him at Team. And then we've looped back over LinkedIn and Slack and on the community. And look, good luck for your next phase. I feel like you guys are just only getting started, and I'm really going to be a cheerleader and a supporter and watch your growth.
And we've got our Jira app in review right now, so here, it's coming soon.
All right. Great. Thank you so much.
Thank you.